updates to the college admissions process, test optional and beyond. What administrators, teachers, and students need to know this year, which will probably change tomorrow, right? My name is Roel Piseño, and I work at the Princeton Review very proudly. Have been here for about 20 years, and so I'll be the old person in the group today. I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Dan Howarth and Henry Price, and I'll introduce them here in just a second, as well as our esteemed colleague, partner, friend, and champion for all students, Michelle Swain, who's based in Austin, Texas, and basically actually should say Round Rock, Texas, just north of Austin. We're very happy to have her join us today. And I do want to say very quickly before I get into the introductions, we are missing one other partner who was going to join us today, Monica Baines, who is based in Alief ISD and has the same title as Michelle does in Round Rock. Unfortunately, she had a death in the family and has been focused on everything there. So we'll keep her in our thoughts and prayers today, and we will circle back with Monica, and hopefully we'll see her on a future webinar. So we'll go ahead and get started. As I was saying earlier, I'm joined by my two colleagues at the Princeton Review and Tutor.com. Henry Price, who's based in the Dallas area, has been with the Princeton Review for 16 years. And Henry, you can see his fancy title there, Senior Manager, Institutional Training and Curriculum, has held many positions at the Princeton Review, and I can personally attest to the knowledge that Henry brings to the table and the experience that's just invaluable in the work that we've been doing, trying to support students from all backgrounds and in different educational settings and situations. So Henry, thank you for joining us today. Dan Howarth, my colleague also, who is based in Durham, North Carolina, and is my sales counterpart on the team. And he has managed, or he does manage, the Carolinas, the Mid-Atlantic, and parts of the Midwest. And Dan also has been with us for about 16 years. So we're very excited to have representation from different parts of the country, different aspects of the company. I have recently taken a different, slight difference in my role. I'm based in San Antonio, Texas, but I work nationally as the director of Gear Up programs, and am also responsible for some strategic K-12 partnerships, mainly in Texas. But again, very proud to be serving you all with this team here from the Princeton Review and Tutor.com. We're highlighting today our featured partner, Michelle Swain, who, as I said, is based in Round Rock ISD, right north of Austin, our state capital. And I can tell you very easily, Michelle is a great person. First of all, she's a mom, very dedicated to the work she's done with her daughters to prepare them for their college admissions and all of that experience. And her husband, who also is I believe still a principal, Michelle can correct me, but I believe he's still a principal in Round Rock ISD. And I think he's pretty close to retirement. So they're looking at some things for the future. And I see that big smile, Michelle, for sure. Anyway, today we will be, among other things, we will be talking a little bit about the changes that we're seeing literally almost on a daily or monthly or even weekly sometimes basis with the college admissions landscape. And we're very happy to provide what we know to be the most recent changes. And certainly we look forward to future updates via webinars. And of course, you can always go to our websites and you can stay in touch with us if you have any specific questions about things that are changing. I think we're ready at this point to move to the next slide. And I will hand it over to my colleague, Dan.
Well, thank you, Roel. And just a little context on where we're coming from, the Princeton Review and Tutor.com. The Princeton Review, we've been a leader in the college readiness space for over 40 years. We're known for many different things. We've got our SAT and ACT retail programs. We publish a lot of books. You might have seen our best 365 college books out there with a lot of fun lists. There's a list of, best top 10 party schools. You might see that in the news often. But the Princeton Review, what we do on our side of the fence is we really help to level the playing field out there. We know that there's a lot of students looking for help, and we are proud to work with a lot of you. A lot of you out there in this webinar are partners. We thank you for your partnership, and we're excited to work with you to learn about your goals and how we can ultimately help with equity and help students get some really great resources to help improve their SAT scores and ACT scores, AP prep as well. And in 2014, the Princeton Review and Tutor.com, we joined forces and became one company, which has been amazing for both companies. And Tutor.com has been a leader in the online on-demand space for over 20 years. We've conducted over 23 million tutoring sessions. We've got over 3,500 tutors that conduct anywhere between 4,000 to 6,000 tutoring sessions every day for our partners. And if some of you out there are from schools and you're thinking, yeah, geez, we got to help learning loss. It'd be great if we had 5 or 10 or more extra teachers and tutors at our campus, to help address learning loss. Well, you're in luck. We've got 3,500 tutors that are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, on demand. And something, Roel and I, we've been with the company for a long time, and our favorite part of the job is to meet new potential partners and talk through your goals and learn about what you're looking to do in terms of helping to build a college going culture and help students prepare for college. And we'd love the opportunity, if you want to reach out to us, we'd love the opportunity to learn a little bit more about your goals and help you support your efforts. So if you want to move on to the next slide, we can talk about test optional. So, as we all know, everybody's world changed a couple years ago when the pandemic hit. Prior to the pandemic, there were less than 50 test optional schools out there. And for the fall of 2023, we got 1,700. So you're looking at about 2,800 or over 2,800 four-year colleges out there, and about 1,700 of them are got to test-free, test optional policies. So when we work with schools, we help them to build a college going culture and help students to teach them how to best apply for colleges. We talk a lot about best fit, and we help them with resources to find, to really think about what kind of college experience they want, what they want to study, and really find a best fit. So, when students are applying for colleges, we say, you should apply for a variety of different types of colleges. So, odds are they're going to have, reach schools, they're going to have safety schools, they're going to have all different types of schools. So odds are not all of them are going to be test-free, test optional. There's going to be some schools that will require the SAT and the ACT. So we do, say that they should take the test and prepare for it if they are applying for a variety of colleges. And if they are taking the ACT, well, they're part of this group, this trend here where it's been, the ACT scores have been dropping year after year the past 5 years. And this last cohort has the lowest score in the past 30 years. So we've definitely seen that trend. And then here, this last slide here, we've got 50% of the students submitted SAT and ACT scores. So that's interesting. Half the students submitted scores, half of them didn't. I think we can, in the next slide, we can delve into a little bit more about that. So we know that 50% of the students submitted a score. Well, let's look at what the other 50%, what happened with them. So 20% of those students, they didn't take an SAT or an ACT score. They recognized that for one reason or another, they decided to not take the test and still apply for colleges. So those test optional colleges. But 30%, we see that those students took an SAT or ACT, but didn't submit it. So it's possible they did research. They looked at what the average SAT and ACT scores were for those colleges that they're targeting, and maybe their score fell below that. So here we also see for the 2022-23 admission cycle, the majority of colleges and schools are going to be test optional. But there's other reasons to take the SAT and the ACT. They're going to continue to have test scores for aid and admissions decisions, and there's scholarships that are tied to the SATs and the ACTs as well. And I think so. We just learned recently a couple weeks ago, MIT, Georgetown, they are no longer test optional. And we're finding that more and more colleges and universities are kind of moving back in that direction. And if they're doing that, it's clear that they've got, that they just, that's something that they want to do. We've got some universities that are staying, are remaining, you need to submit an SAT or an ACT score. And you've got some colleges that just don't have the resources to dedicate to pour through every single college application. They use the SAT and the ACT to divide out and to use that as part of the process. It's just something that we've seen, and we see with it. We'll always see that. So then we've got the next slide. And I think I'm passing over to Henry for this.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I thought it might be important for us to really delineate what all the various things are that schools are saying these days. And Dan, you've been saying test optional, and that is kind of a catch-all phrase we use for the various categories that colleges might be using. But let's break that down a little bit more, because there's actually a variety of different things colleges might be doing right now. When we say test optional, sort of as a catch-all, we're probably thinking of this first one: test optional for all students. They are neutral, the college is, as to whether you submit your scores. So a student might want to, if their scores are a little higher than average for that school. A student might choose not to if their scores a little bit below average for that school, as you might imagine. Keeping in mind, though, that many schools still consider those scores when it comes to things like scholarships. So if you're making the conscious decision at a test optional school not to submit, you may not be qualifying for some of the other things beyond admission that are important to you as an applicant. So something just to keep in mind. There are then some different things colleges may be doing, such as test optional for some, which is kind of like you've tested out of the requirement to take an SAT or ACT for admissions. If your GPA is at a certain level, or your class rank is at a certain level, essentially you're going to get admitted, so you don't have to submit your SAT score. You still might want to. You might qualify for more aid if you do, but you have now sort of overcome that barrier through other means. So that would be a test optional for some applicants scenario. A little bit less frequent is what they might call test flexible, which is to say, maybe we'll ask you to take a specific different test other than the SAT or ACT to meet those admissions requirements. Some schools might be looking at AP exams as a way of doing that. We have heard whispers that some school systems may be developing their own admissions tests over the next few years, specifically in California, where they have gone completely test blind, which is the one we'll talk about in just a second. In order to balance that out, they may be developing their own tests. So we'll be staying tuned to see what happens with that. And yes, test blind is also a thing. And in this case, a college will tell a student, look, you can submit your SAT or ACT scores if you want to. We are not going to look at them or consider them when it comes to admissions. So in other words, we'd rather you didn't, because we don't really want the extra paperwork, right? And that is a completely valid decision that a college might make. But as Dan said a few minutes ago, things are starting to revert back a little bit. We've seen more schools that were in some of these categories go back to saying, yeah, our jobs actually were harder without the standardized tests. We're going to go ahead and put them back into the requirements. So the best advice I could give any applicant right now is go directly to the school's website and see what their current policy is. It could change with very little notice. All right, let's take a look again at what one might consider if in fact one is applying to a school that does not require an SAT or ACT. Well, as you can imagine, it just means everything else gets bumped up a notch in importance, right? Your number one thing that every college looks at, no matter what, is your transcript. That has not changed. But if you are not submitting SAT or ACT scores, whether you just choose not to or the college specifically told you not to, it means that things like the college admissions essay, your extracurricular activities, your letters of recommendation, and if they require one, an interview might take on added importance. So it becomes incumbent on the applicant to really think long and hard about, okay, don't have to submit my SAT and ACT scores, cool, but that just means I got to get an even earlier start and work even harder possibly on making sure I've got all these other ducks in a row. One more thing I wanted to take a look at today, we would be remiss if we talked about standardized testing as it stands right now without talking about the fact that the SAT has announced major changes. Now, I'm going to talk a lot about SAT on this slide. That is not to slight the ACT in any way. They're just not in the news right now. So I imagine you have more questions about SAT at this particular moment in time. So what they have said is, we would like to become more student friendly. This is partially in response to the fact that fewer schools are requiring the test. And while that was a COVID concession in a lot of ways, there have been questions about the correlation between standardized testing scores and college success for a long time. So the SAT is constantly looking for ways to improve and become more relevant. One way they're going to do that in the next couple of years is to go digital. They're piloting this with international applicants this coming spring. So in just a few months, if a student is applying to a US college from overseas, they are going to be taking this new version of the SAT. Here domestically, the first version of this that a student will be able to take, unless they're in a pilot program, is next fall's PSAT. And then everyone, unless they have a specific accommodation, will be taking the test digitally in spring of 2024. Pilots of this have already been going on for the past year. College Board reports that students have found this to be a very positive change. Most students who took the test this way found it to be less stressful than the paper pencil version, and virtually all educators who were part of the pilot program reported they had a positive experience giving that test. That was easier for them than receiving dozens of boxes and keeping them all straight and handing them out to students on test day, as you might imagine. Incidentally, and I said I was going to talk mostly about SAT, ACT was prepared to do this same thing in 2020. And then because it was 2020, they decided to put that on the back burner and deal with all the other realities of life. But they are prepared to do this, and I would not be surprised at all to see the ACT go digital anytime now and make similar changes. So what's different about the new digital SAT? We've been keeping a close eye on this. Well, it's shorter. And that's another way that they've said they want to be student friendly. What used to be a 4-hour test when the essay was required became a 3-hour test when they made the essay either optional or then made it go away last year. Now the entire test taking experience on the computer will be just 2 hours long. If you were to do the math, no pun intended, on the SAT, you would find that you have a little bit more time per question than you used to on the digital version of the test than you did on the paper versions. The reading passages are shorter. I'm going to have a lot of students who are going to be really mad that they missed out on this. Shorter reading passages. So you just read a paragraph or two rather than read a page worth of information and then try to answer a whole bunch of questions about that. A calculator will be allowed on all math questions, and they're actually going to designate a particular type of calculator based on the type of question. It might be scientific, might be graphing, depending on what you need for that question. And it's a calculator that appears on your screen. Students may use their own computer or tablet or a school-issued device. A lot of campuses are going to do this in a computer lab or handout on a computer on wheels situation, but students can use their own. That is not to say they're going to take it at home. All students will still be taking this at a designated campus that's a testing center. And maybe the most interesting part of this from our perspective, since this is what we do, we sort of analyze this stuff, is that it's going to become computer adaptive by section. Those of you who've taken the GRE in the past decade or so might recognize this idea. It's computer adaptive by section, which means that if you do really well on the first math section, you get an even harder second math section, and the same with the English side. And if you don't do as well on the first section, you get a little bit easier second section. I won't get into the strategies that we will be talking about all of this, but it is important for students and parents to know that the test is going to be structured this way and start to think about how they might want to approach it. So those are the big pieces of news in the college admissions and testing world in fall of 2022. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Roel, who's going to reintroduce Michelle, and we're going to go over a lot of these issues. So welcome, Roel and Michelle.
Thank you, Henry. Man, I wish that we could just bottle everything that Henry has in his brain because I think we could probably make a few pennies on all of it. Thank you, Henry. That's really, really informational and insightful. Um, so the questions, you guys can all see the questions here. And by the way, computer adaptive dissection, as a dad of a 16-year-old junior this year, I can tell you that that's a phrase I'm going to start using with him just as we apply to different things like he wants a car. I think I'm going to respond, you know what? I may be computer adaptive to that bisection. Let's put that on hold. Help him understand that concept a little bit if you get my drift. Anyway, so Michelle, it's your turn. The heat is on. No, I'm kidding. Really, really excited about this part of the presentation. And, I'm always excited to work with my colleagues, and Henry and Dan are always ready to go. Michelle is the same way. Have a great story that I won't tell right now about our first meeting actually, and where we had a breakthrough there that was applicable in both ways, both for the district, I believe, and then for the Princeton Review. Because one of the things that we try to do constantly is just measure ourselves and try to figure out how we can improve our services for the students we serve. And so, for a company that's been around 40 years plus, sometimes that's a little bit challenging because we think a lot about what we say and what we think, right? We think very highly of it. So it's partners like Michelle who really kind of keep us grounded and help us to understand really what we're trying to accomplish there with the students, and sometimes in the conversations we're having with the families of these students. So Michelle, it's my pleasure to have this session here with you. And my first question, or our first question, how does Round Rock ISD, how does your district help students identify institutions that match their values and aspirations? And those are huge words, values and aspirations.
They really are. And it's a huge effort that is a combination of a whole lot of different stakeholders that come together to support students in this effort. And we are an AVID district. And so we have AVID programming that helps support that. Our counselors, our teachers, we try to make sure everyone is as educated as possible. I mean, we talk to the students about the concept of safe schools and reach schools and dream schools, and identifying not just the schools that they know nearby or that they see play football on Saturday, or that their parents went to, but helping them understand that there is a very wide array of public and private colleges out there, large and small, liberal arts, STEM-based, just a very wide range. And so trying to think more about, in looking at where you're going to college, what kinds of things do you want in a college? Do you want it to be a large institution? Do you want it to be small? Do you want it to be rural, urban, suburban? And what do you have to do to get into that institution? So everybody's heard of Harvard and Yale, but what do you have to do to get in there? And is that really the right fit for you just because everybody talks about them? We're right outside of Austin, so the struggle is real. A&M, UT, and so kids are looking at the admissions for those, but helping them understand that there are more schools out there that might be a better fit or might be just as good a fit. Part of it is looking for a school that actually has the program that you're interested in studying. So you don't want to decide that you're going to go to college X to find out that they don't have the ABC program that you wanted to major in. So that's a piece of the match. But when I talk about the idea of safe schools and reach schools, some of that is based on what you bring to the table that the college or university is going to look at. And so one of the things we know with SAT and ACT scores in the past for schools that were not test optional, we had a very clear guideline, and we knew what those scores looked like for the average student at each of those campuses. And so a student could look at that data and kind of measure themselves against that. As we see places going a little bit more test optional, that's adjusting a little bit, but the reality is a lot of the communication that I've had with college admissions officers is that the system still hasn't really changed as much in terms of students who submit those scores and who are at or above those averages for that college or university are still the ones that have a really good chance of getting in. And so one of the things that we've talked to our students about is the difference between, you know, 200 points on your SAT, or 2 or 3 or 4 points on your ACT, and what that can do for your safe school pool and what that can do for your reach school pool, And a lot of students are finding that what they thought was a reach school, when they really sit down and look at the data on the kinds of students that are in those campuses and the performance patterns, they realize that's not a reach school, that's a safe school. I have data that actually says that I will be very successful at that campus. And so it really changes the scope of what they are allowing themselves to look at. And I think I've told you before in my own situation, my oldest daughter, when she was first embarking on this journey, she had in her head what her safe schools were and what her reach schools were. And when she got her SAT or her PSAT score and started looking at SATs and then got her SAT score, she realized that the school she really wanted to go to was not a reach school or a dream school. It was very much in her ability to go, and not only to go, but to go through automatic admission. So she was able, by her GPA and her college readiness assessment score, to get automatic admission and not have to worry about recommendations and not have to worry about holistic review and not have to worry about all the things that come towards the end. So it's
The apple
really
doesn't fall far from the tree, huh, Michelle?
a little bit, but it's really about beginning with the end in mind, knowing what you want to do, what kind of environment you want to learn in, and then picking institutions that will both challenge you, but also will meet those parameters that are going to make you feel comfortable and successful.
Excellent. Great information, Michelle. The only thing that I sort of keep hearing in my head is the question about bringing the parents along, right? Because that's something that, depending on who you're talking to, right, it's the biggest challenge, or it's something that, you know, parents are willing to do. Is there, just briefly, in your parent speak, is there something there that you would add about getting that information to the parents before we move on to the next question?
Sure. So one of the things that we do is we have a college fair every year, and we invite hundreds of colleges and universities and institutions to our district to uh, talk to our community, to talk to our parents, to talk to our students. And I started going to that when my oldest was a freshman. And so the process we kind of went through is, the first year, you're just going to figure out what's the landscape. And then as a sophomore, you're gathering all the different literature and figuring out what are the kinds of schools out there, what are the kinds of schools I'm interested in. As you get to your junior year, you're starting to cull that literature that you get from that. You're starting to talk and have some specific conversations with certain colleges, certain universities. And then by senior year, if you haven't already submitted for application and everything by the time the college fair comes around, then you're able to go to those 2 or 3 schools and ask those very targeted, very specific questions and make those decisions. And having the parents be part of that process and be able to talk about how that works. I know with my youngest daughter, when we had the conversation about where she wanted to go, it was between a public and a private. And when we talked about what that would look like, we made the decision as a family to go with the public because of financial aid and things that she was going to be able to do going to a public school that she wouldn't have been able to do going to a private, because the funds wouldn't have been there for the extras, because they would have all gone to tuition and housing and that kind of thing. So talking through just what does that look like? Do you want to be really far away from home, or do you want to be close? You know, my mama heart is happy that they're in Texas, but they're happy that they're 6 hours away, so I can't pop in on them. So
Yeah.
just thinking through all of those different factors and features and parameters to figure out what's going to work best for you as a family.
Excellent, excellent. Man, we could just talk about families. It could be a whole webinar in and of itself, and maybe we'll do that as well. And I do want to just really quickly recognize actually another colleague that you see her name on the screen. She's our Wizard of Oz today, behind the magic curtain. Mercedes Munn is managing all of the interactions that are happening on chat, and obviously managing the slides here. So I know that she probably, if she could, she probably would reach and throw a shoe at me if I try to keep going on something here, because I'm kind of shy, if you haven't noticed. But Mercedes, thank you for your help. And Mercedes also with the Princeton Review and Tutor.com will be interacting with us here in a little bit. So we'll move on to the next question. Michelle, what are the pros and cons of test optional admissions in your purview?
So I think test optional was around before COVID. before the pandemic. We know that. It was primarily used at smaller institutions that received a smaller volume of applications and were able to actually go through and do the holistic review on every single student. It's very prohibitive in large institutions, given the number of applications they receive, to really be test optional successfully, which is why you're starting to see some of those larger institutions revert back to requiring the tests. I think that while it was a positive during the time of COVID, I think there's a lot of things that we still need to be considering when we're looking at whether or not to submit that test score. So one of the biggest ones, and I think Henry kind of alluded to it, is when we look at what is the average SAT or ACT score for the student body at that institution, does my personal score fall at or above that level? Because if it does, then submitting that score is going to help you. If it doesn't, or if you have test anxiety or test phobia, or if you are in a situation where you really can't retake the test for whatever reason to increase your score, then you might want to, think more of that test optional or not submitting that test. But if your test is at or above, then you definitely want to enhance your application with that information. I think one of the things that is dangerous in this time of schools going back and forth is that if you make a decision as a sophomore or junior to not worry about the SAT or the ACT, and then your chosen school decides to switch from test optional, then you are now less prepared to take that assessment and be successful in your admissions process using that data point. So when we think about test optional, I think being prepared for the test, it's kind of like when we talk to kids about being college and career ready. You need to be prepared to go to college, whether you choose to go to college or not. You need to be prepared to do well on the test or to be successful on that assessment, whether you use it or not. And there are definitely some reasons that you would and some that you wouldn't. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand is test optional applies to overall admissions into these colleges or universities. It does not necessarily apply to the smaller schools of education, schools of engineering, college of business within the larger university. And so those smaller pieces of that college or university still may have their own requirements, and you may not be able to get into that particular field of study if you don't have that score, if you don't have that information that you can share with them that says, yes, I'm going to be successful. Additionally, and you've alluded to it earlier, the scholarships piece. So there are presidential scholarships, there are different scholarships that come from the various institutions that consider that SAT or ACT score, because it's something that is familiar, it's a known, it's something that they have been able to see time and time again how that data plays out with what happens with the student's success once they enter that institution. And so they're still relying on that information. So getting into honors programs also might look at that. It'll be part of the data set. It won't be the only factor, but it's going to help a student to have that in their back pocket if they choose to go into one of those arenas. I think that it also does, the whole test optional piece does open doors for students that might otherwise not have a stellar score and be able to get into certain colleges or universities. It gives them the opportunity to show who they are beyond that score. But again, I know that especially the larger institutions, the public institutions that get thousands and thousands of applications each year, they are going to have to most likely go back to requiring the test. And we want our kids to be prepared for that opportunity.
That's right. I think, when I talk to my son about it, I tell him he's an athlete. He understands when I talk about things in terms of athletic events and games and matches and his soccer match or his skills. And to me, it's really simple. The college admissions process is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And to your point, if we're preparing the students for this marathon, you take into account all of the different aspects of every inch of preparation that you can have to be prepared to make the best decision you can make, regardless of where you end up going. I think that's a really good way to put it. All right, we'll move on to the next question. Do your high schools have criteria for determining whether students should take standardized tests? And if so, which test they should take?
Okay.
Long question.
So our district has looked at both the SAT suite from College Board and the ACT materials, and we've given both within the school day at various times. We've settled on the SAT suite, not that it's any better inherently than the ACT, but it came with some other tools and resources that we really felt matched our need. We give the PSAT 8-9 to all of our 8th graders. It is their beginning of their journey to transition from state assessments to college readiness assessments. So that 8th grade year is kind of when they're transitioning out of the annual state assessment and moving into focusing on their future and those college readiness benchmarks and those college readiness data points. And so we do that with our 8th graders. And then at 10th and 11th grade, we offer the PSAT and MSQT to our entire student body again. And so those students can take it in 10th grade to kind of get familiar with the assessment, to get that data from AP Potential so that we can help push kids into more advanced course opportunities and have them challenge themselves. Also to have them really rethink their own perception of where they stand within their peer group. A lot of them think that they're not as smart as they are. And so that a lot of times is a validating score. It also allows them to connect that score with Khan Academy to get that free personalized practice in content so that they can build their content knowledge in areas that they might be a little bit weaker. And then they take it again in the 11th grade year, in the junior year. And that is where they are qualifying for National Merit Scholarship opportunities. That is where they are fine-tuning what they are doing to be prepared for the SAT, really honing in on those areas that they need to shore up. And then we offer the SAT school day in the spring. So the PSATs are in October of the school year at all 3 grade levels. And then in March, we do the SAT. And so between the PSAT and the SAT in junior year, those students are able to really do a lot of focused practice. We also offer Princeton Review coursework for them to engage in. I don't remember if that is another question. I think that is another question, so I'll hold off on that. But one of the reasons that we went to this is we found that, number one, our students that were not applying to college, a lot of them were not doing that in part because they did not have an SAT or an ACT score. And that might have been a function of finances. It might have been a function of family dynamics and logistics. They had to stay home on Saturday to take care of their siblings, or they didn't have transportation or whatever. And so by building it into our school day and systematizing it through the entire grade level, we took away that obstacle, that barrier to college admissions for those students. So everyone has that college readiness score. And then when we decided to go back and do the basically 3 practice tests along the way, one of those reasons was because we found data that spoke to students doing better each time they take the assessment. And so with multiple exposures to the format of the SAT through taking the PSAT, helping students understand their strengths and weaknesses, helping them understand how the tests look and work and feel, that helped with their success. So we don't pick and choose who gets to take it. We open it up to all of our students.
Awesome. You're talking a lot about students owning their own process, right? And understanding all of those little pieces that you've mentioned, so that as they're taking all these practice tests, it really is about endurance and building endurance with the understanding of the differences of sections, or how you might answer an SAT algebraic question versus an algebra question in your regular math class. So there's a lot to unpack there. Next question. And I just want to mention, I think Mercedes is managing our chat. So if there's any questions that pop up there, Mercedes, please jump in. We'll move on to the next question. How do you ensure equitable access to test prep and admissions support?
So we have done quite a bit of work in this area. One of the things that we have done is partnered with College Board to bring in trainers to train our curriculum writers, our assessment writers, our teachers on what those assessments really look like, what the construct of those questions is, so that they can figure out how to make our local assessments mirror that format. So kids are much more prepared and much more comfortable with the way those questions are asked. So that has been a huge help. We also have embedded Princeton Review into our AVID 3, which is our junior year course, and our CRSS course, which is College Readiness and Study Skills. That's a single semester course that our students can take in high school for college readiness. And so we know from AVID that those are our students who typically are kind of our bubble kids, our kids that are kind of right in the middle that might need that little extra push, that little extra support. And so by embedding Princeton Review in those classes, our students are able to have those, not only the practice, but also the strategies. And so one of the things I was going to say earlier when I was talking about Khan Academy is the content. It helps students to see exactly where they need to work on based on their PSAT scores. It helps them to practice those kinds of content questions that they need to work on. But Princeton Review is more about the strategies of how to attack the test, how to take the test, how to be more effective and efficient and work smarter and not harder within that testing environment. So by marrying those two, it really helps support our students both in content and context of the testing experience. So we've embedded those question types into our curriculum. We've embedded Khan Academy into our classrooms to say, we need to use this as bell ringers. We need to encourage our students to spend that time practicing. But then we also have the Princeton Review that can help with supporting strategies. And so for our students who are not in AVID 3 or CRSS, we offer Princeton Review courses outside of the school day. We offer them virtually. We have teachers that we have partnered with Princeton Review to get them trained. They are able to then use all of the materials and have all of the understanding of the different strategies and the details as the testing changes. They get updates, so they're very knowledgeable about what's current reality in that testing landscape. And so they offer those courses, and we've decided to do it virtually for a couple of reasons. One, we cover a pretty large geographic area, and by doing it virtually, it allows our students to hop on from wherever they are in the district. We also have some trainers that are at certain campuses and fewer at others. We also want to make sure that the courses that we're offering outside of the school day work for the students' schedules. And so we try to make sure that the instructors set their times so that they are not overlapping with each other, so that if a student has to work every Tuesday and Thursday, or if they have band practice every Monday night after school, they still have access to taking those courses. One of the things that we've done to make them more affordable is that we have, again, worked with Princeton Review. We pay for the teachers to get trained, and then we receive those materials at a reduced cost. And so we are able to then pass that smaller cost on to our students. So I believe right now our traditional students pay about $125 for the instruction, and then our free and reduced lunch students only have to pay $25. And that's that equity piece as well. So that's so that they are still able to purchase the materials and participate in the instruction. They have skin in the game, but it is not at a cost point that is prohibitive to them. And so it really ends up being a break-even opportunity for us as a district, because we're able to provide a huge value, $800, $900 value to our students at a reduced cost, with people that are familiar with their district, with people that they're comfortable with. They still get that high quality instruction and have the opportunity to do it at a time that works for them. So and then the other thing that we've done with that is we've identified key points during the year that we need to offer these courses. Mm-hmm. So we offer a course in the early fall, September and early October, prior to that PSAT. We allow our sophomores and juniors to register for that. And they do that and do the practice, and then they can take that PSAT in October. We offer another round in January and February to allow them to get their PSAT scores and then take action on those scores between the time that they take the PSAT and the time they take the SAT. We also offer an opportunity in April and May so that those students who are wanting to retake the SAT or wanting to get a leg up on their PSAT and haven't taken the course before can do it during that time period. And then in the summer, we offer a national merit camp opportunity. So we've identified a target score, and every student in our district who scores above that target score on the sophomore PSAT is then invited to participate in the Princeton Review coursework so that they can kind of hone their skills and get those few extra points they need to get over that national merit hump, if you will, so that they can have access to all of those amazing scholarships and opportunities and admissions, because there are colleges and universities that will give national merit scholars automatic admission. So those are kind of the ways we have used Khan Academy. It's the way that we've used our learning from College Board, infusing it into our assessments, and then it's the way that we have used Princeton Review to date with our in-school and outside of school opportunities.
Excellent. I mean, you literally are providing access in so many different ways. Michelle, can you just anecdotally, just really quickly, how have your families, your parents, the students especially, received the option for virtual instruction?
They actually really like it. Because the students do not have to be in a certain place at a certain time. Nobody has to take off work or miss another activity to be able to transport them if they're not yet driving. They're able to be more flexible, but also with the online platform that Princeton Review offers, it's actually more, the functionality is better in the online setting because they have access to more resources, more tools, more data within that environment. Our teachers like it because they're not staying late at school. They're not having to worry about, the doors being locked or safety or anything like that. They can do it from the comfort of their own home. It really has been a positive. We do have the advantage that we were already on the pathway to one-to-one for our high schools before the pandemic. And so the pandemic just accelerated that. So we do have one-to-one access. So all of our students have a Chromebook that they are able to take back and forth from school. So that is another non-issue, if you will, for access. And then we do have hotspots that we can check out to our students if they do have any kind of connectivity issues.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's a great information there. And I'm just going to check. We've got about 12 minutes, so we'll get through these next couple of questions. Do you offer stakeholder professional learning, for teachers, administrators, counselors, families in the areas of college admissions?
Yes. So I mentioned earlier, we brought College Board in to do training with our teachers. We have had various meetings with our administrators regarding all of the college admissions pieces. But one of the things I think is most helpful is we've had a series of parent seminars where we have highlighted various pieces of the college admissions process, where we'll talk in one about college credit and high school opportunities. We'll talk about the PSAT and the SAT and how to use Princeton Review and Khan Academy to accelerate performance. We've talked about, have had seminars talking about how to pick the right college or university. We've offered parent seminars where we brought in college admissions officers and had a panel discussion. So those have really helped our families. I do a lot of the same kinds of things with our teachers in training opportunities. We have an advanced academic summer conference, and I always have a student panel. I often will bring in someone talking about how to write a good college recommendation letter for your students. I work with our advanced teachers, and so they're typically the ones that get asked to do those letters of recommendation. So making sure they understand how to best shine for the student in those letters, especially if the student is choosing test optional, because those letters of recommendation really will be a huge component of that process. We have information that we've added to our website so that there's more resources to navigate. We're working with a variety of other vendors. We're moving to Naviance, which we haven't had in the past. Our counseling team has tons of these kinds of conversations. So it really is about helping everyone understand and begin with the end in mind. This is why this happens in the college admissions process. So this needs to happen in high school. So this needs to be happening in middle school. So this is what we do in elementary, and making sure that that is a K-16 perspective.
Excellent. So I'm hearing you talk a little bit about setting a cadence, if you will. That's the word that I'll use when you're talking about professional learning opportunities for any of the people listed there. Is there a cadence that you guys take into account as you're looking at a very busy school year, obviously, with fewer opportunities for professional development? Do you focus more on summer? How does that play out?
So I get my teachers, my advanced teachers, in the beginning of the school year for a day, and then in the middle of the school year for a half day. And so it's being very strategic in how that time is used, because we want to give them PLC time as well. So bringing in student panels, bringing in guest speakers that can very succinctly hit the high points and make sure that they're getting that information. But also we have a teacher platform for asynchronous professional development. And we're putting more and more content there so that it can be on demand for teachers. Their favorite TV show is not on tonight, so what could they read about or learn about or watch? And so they may hop on and do that course, or their principal has given them an hour of a professional development day to do personalized learning. And so those opportunities are then available for them to go in and explore that information that way.
Excellent. All right, we'll go right through the next question, so that we're hopefully not run out of time. But how does your team guide students in crafting successful college applications?
So a lot of this work is done by our counseling teams, and they are phenomenal at the work that they do. And there are a ton of resources and references that they can go to with sample applications, sample essays, prompts that they can write to, practice writing to. We also have FAFSA days. So in the state of Texas, to graduate, a student now has to complete the FAFSA. And so we have workshops for parents and students to come in and work on completing that, where they have the guidance of all of the experts around them that can guide them through that process. And I don't envy anybody still doing the FAFSA, because that's not a fun process. So having that support really is important. Some of it too is helping the kids understand how to best showcase their skill set, writing resumes. One of the things we do early on is in 8th grade, we actually have a lesson in our English class that is on creating a professional email account. So you may have had I'm trying to think, Game of Thrones 453, or, just whatever it might have been that you used as your initial email or your fun email or whatever. But understanding that you need to have an email that you can put on job applications. You need to have an email that you can associate with your College Board account, your Khan Academy account, your college applications, your scholarship applications. And that email address needs to convey who you are as a mature applicant in those situations. And so that kind of begins that trajectory for our students. And we continue with that work all the way through. We have little mini lessons that we do all the way through to help them think about course taking patterns, to help them think about what will set them up for the most success when they get to that college application. And starting a resume early, building that resume and adding to that all the way through, so that when you sit down in the end, you're not trying to do it all at once, but that you've added things to it. Both of my girls actually started their resumes in elementary school. They were Girl Scouts. They were involved in a lot of theater arts and dance and choir kinds of opportunities and church opportunities. And so we just started building that environment for them, and they've just edited it all the way through. And so now I'm hands off. They've got their copies. They're editing it on their own.
That's excellent. In this day and age with all the social media that our kids have access to, it's really about simplifying their own marketability through their own activities, right? So it's great to hear. And wow, elementary school, I don't think my son was even thinking about a resume. He was trying to figure out which foot he should kick the soccer ball with, but we'll get there. All right, next question. Start talking, well, we've talked about the FAFSA a little bit. So how do you direct students to resources to help them attain financial aid?
So helping them understand about the scholarships that colleges and universities actually offer, in addition to the FAFSA, I think is really important. A lot of colleges have the presidential scholarships, the public ones especially, have those where if you hit a certain GPA or ranking class and a certain assessment score on the SAT or the ACT, they will just give you all of this money. And so I know we had a student that retook, I don't remember honestly if it was the SAT or the ACT, but they retook it twice because by increasing their score, it made the difference of $8,000 a year in scholarship support.
Crazy.
Just by increasing that score. So it really, that really does create an opportunity for them. We have our counselors maintain a huge database of scholarships that they share with our students so that the students can go in there and find the ones that apply to them. Our PI Foundation, our school support foundation in the community, also has pulled together a lot of different scholarships that they support students in applying for. And it's really helping them understand that you don't apply one and done. You apply for everything that you think you might get and then see what you actually do. That any aid is better than no aid at all. And then also, what is the if you're talking about public versus private, what is the private college going to offer you? If that gets you down to what public school is going to cost, is that really what you want to do? Or do you want to take those other scholarships that you get and take that public school cost and bring it down even further, giving yourself some breathing room? So just thinking about all of those different parameters. There are several different sources in the community that you can go to as well for various scholarships and applications. Your Sertoma group, your other groups like that will have those. And then also just the activities that they are involved in over the course of their high school experience. A lot of those will have a scholarship associated with it, whether it's band or choir or football or whatever.
Mhm. Excellent. Well, we're getting close to the end here. We have a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Mercedes, who I think is going to share a little bit about some of the questions we may have gotten and next steps.
Thank you, Roel. Michelle, thank you so much for an amazing discussion. We do have a couple of questions. One question we have is, do we know if the ACT is also planning to go digital?
I'm going to defer to Henry after I say this. I think everything is going digital. In Texas, our state assessments have gone digital. We've been doing the digital PSAT 8-9 forever. I say forever, for at least 5 years, I think. So I think that's the wave of the future, but I'll let Henry expound on that.
I mean, yes, Michelle, and yes to the question. It's inevitable. And in fact, they have been technologically prepared to do this for a while. I think they just have not made any announcements yet. I would not be surprised at all. I don't think they want to literally do it on the same timeline as SAT, but I would not be surprised to see it happen within the next couple of years. Absolutely.
Awesome. And just one more question. Let me see. Do we know if the UC system is planning to implement their own test?
We don't know. We've been hearing rumors about this for a while. It's certainly on the list of things they're considering. I don't know exactly how. I mean, it'll take them a few years, I would assume, right? So even if they're planning it, we probably won't hear about it for a little while. I suspect they're doing something because they are sort of that. They are the thing you would not want to be in a lot of ways, as in they are a huge, if you add UCs and Cal States together, they have more students than any other system in the country. And they therefore have more applicants than anybody in the country. And they've gone test blind. So they don't have an easy way to skim, to find out who's qualified. I don't think that's sustainable, most likely for the long term. So I would not be surprised to see them either develop a test of their own, which we have heard that they're at least thinking about, or coming up with some other way of doing this. And I don't know what that will be. I don't see them going back to SAT. There's actually legislation in California that has canceled. You don't get to look at the SAT and ACT anymore for equity reasons. So they will need to come up with something. I just don't know exactly what it will end up looking like.
Okay, amazing. Okay, well, that's all for today. Michelle, Roel, Dan, Henry, thank you so much for your time. Everyone who attended, thank you. We hope that you join our next webinar. That's going to be on November 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Equity analysis. We are exploring a year of insights from online tutoring in K-12 programs. This will be led by John Calvello, our VP of Institutional Sales, as well as Dr. Amy Dietzman, Senior Director of Learning Strategies. We hope you tune in for that as well. And then any last words, Roel, or team?
No, I just want to thank Michelle, especially for making time today. I know she's on a very busy schedule with her work, and we really appreciate, obviously, the partnership and everything that we learned from our experience with Round Rock ISD starts and ends with Michelle. So thank you, Michelle, for everything you do.
Happy to be a partner.